Welcome to The First Turn. I'm your host, Hyena, and today, Llama and I are talking about This Week in Warhammer. If you like what you hear, give us a like, comment, subscribe, or share, or let us know if there's something you'd like to hear us talk about. Alright, let's get to it.
Welcome to The First Turn. I'm Hyena.
I'm Llama.
And it's been a while.
Welcome back.
Yeah, we've had some stuff going on that's not worthy of talking about here because it doesn't pertain to the hobby, you know, really at all. But we had, needless to say, a couple of weeks of being busy. So we're back now, and we're going to start picking it up again. It is nice to see that nothing has changed, though, in the last couple weeks because it's all the same kind of stuff being showed off.
Nothing.
You know, we've got Horus Heresy stuff being released constantly.
Hey, are there Saturnine Terminators and a Dreadnought coming?
Yeah, the Dreadnought. Is that Dreadnought? What do you want to know about the Dreadnought? I can direct
there were like 11 articles about.
I can direct you to an article about anything you want to know about that Dreadnought. But we are well into the summer. We've got, General's Handbook in hand for AOS.
Brand
We've
new.
got new edition for Horus Heresy. We've got new edition. Is it an edition change for Middle Earth coming?
Possibly.
I thought maybe.
Because what it feels like is those two games have a new edition, and then AOS and 40k both got their like mid-edition update thing or once-a-year update thing.
Yeah. And they feel pretty big. They're pretty big updates. Yeah. The 40k side of things comes from detachments and new detachments for every army. It comes from points changes and rules tweaks and things like that, which is always great to see. AOS obviously has a new General Handbook, which is a new season that introduces less and more options in one way or the other, for list constructions and, army building standpoints. So every list that I've built prior to this General's Handbook has had to drastically change.
Yeah.
Because either A, the new season's rules don't really jive well with the army construction, or because points have changed and made certain other things really attractive to bring all of a sudden. So, love the shakeups. I personally love to see it. I know a lot of people don't, but I'm in the boat of yes, make changes every once in a while and make it fresh and new. I feel like that keeps the game going.
It does.
You saw.
Well, it's like when you get a big patch for a video game, right? And like maybe you lost interest for a few weeks or months in that video game, and then a big patch comes. It's like, hey, there's enough coming here that now I'm going to pick that back up.
New modes, new tweaks, make certain things available again. Things like that. I love to see it. Otherwise, I mean, you run into what you had in like Warhammer 40k 7th edition, where it got really stale, and people started looking at other games because 40k was kind of a little bit in the dumps at that time.
Yep.
So, yes, refreshing your own game and making it feel new keeps people in it. So, neat. Love to see it. I personally have been looking at some of the new stuff that's coming out, and while the models are great, I'm not particularly interested in playing the game systems that they're for, but I have been looking at hobbying and some conversion potentials for things, because I think there is a lot of potential there for very interesting proxies, especially when it comes to like the Cathay Army.
For Old World. Yeah,
that one is a brand new faction coming out for Old World, and there's a lot of really cool stuff there for a lot of really cool, or a lot of different systems.
And I think it's the first major wave of new plastic for that game system since they rebooted it. They've given us single models here and there, but and they gave us the kit of like the Foot Squires, right? But it was like a big wave of all new plastic. It is.
So for like the launch, Bretonia and Tomb Kings both got their own mini release wave, right? They got a new like Bone Dragon. You had the Pegasus characters. You had the Foot Squires, like you said. And so there have been some new plastic kits, but this is a full plastic kit army, which I was surprised to see so soon. I really was surprised to see that Cathay was going to be introduced to the old world at all. I wasn't expecting anything that big or that impressive.
I mean, we had suspicions that based on the success of Total War Warhammer, that like Cathay, Kislev, Chaos Dwarves, possibly, were maybe Vampire Coast, were like these things that give them an opportunity to justify making a boatload of plastic.
Right. Yeah.
And otherwise, they just gave most people a new model here or there, like a character, or even one that they sat on for a while. But it let the people who had their old armies, who complained they couldn't use them anymore, now you can play them again. But they only gave us so many. It was like 9 factions, I think, that they brought back, and now here's your new ones to expand the game. And the cool thing, I think, with the Cathay models, I think a lot of them look great. Like you said, I'm not that interested in the game system or rectangular bases, so sue me. But they still made the army feel old world-ish. It just is obviously much more updated.
Right. Yeah. I mean, it's because
I think they
doesn't quite fit the aesthetic of the old world, really, because you are competing with a lot of old models. If you took them and put them next to Beastmen, that would be like, ooh, those look like they should be fighting one another.
Next to Empire.
Or Empire. Yeah, any of those.
But what you touched on there, conversion potential. Like they're from the regular foot soldiers, if you put them on rounds and use them as something in Cities of Sigmar,
right?
You use their dragon as anything.
I mean, with the right paint job, really, they could be proxies for anything.
Yeah.
Right? They could be, they're kind of, because they've got, sort of ornate armor, they could be elves of some kind. They could just be humans with swords and shields. They could be, undead soldiers for like a vampire army.
Make them ghosts.
Yeah. You can make them ghosts. Like there's all kinds of conversion potential. I think the big balloon could be something. Even maybe in 40k or in Necromunda or something.
Kharadron's army, if you do a little work.
Anything. Yeah. There's a lot of conversion potential. The big giant could be a lot of different things. I mean, it could be. Especially when you look at things like the Regiments of Renown for AOS, where these kind of like, they don't really fit into the armies that they're for, especially the ones that like cross factions. So you could really just have like, well, one of them is like a troll, like a big troll plus a guy handling the troll, right? Well, it doesn't need to be a troll and it doesn't need to be a goblin. You could say, here's a big creature and here's a little creature controlling it, right? And those two creatures could be any two models that just fit that paradigm. You know what I mean?
Yep.
Like, I have ideas to do, a Skaven version of that. I was looking at ideas to do an Idoneth version of that. Like, there's all kinds of things you could do with that.
Yeah, and we even talked that big construct could be in like Ossiarch Bonereapers pretty easily.
Yeah.
Because that's what that entire army is. So, always an opportunity when a brand new army in any of their systems comes out with models that you can see cross over to 2 or 3 systems. That's a good way to move them.
Or even if it's like you don't care for the aesthetic as much as the official one, if the price is right, then that's another reason to pick it up. Like if I have to buy 5 Cavaliers for my Cities of Sigmar army and they are $65 for 5, but then here comes a similar sized, kind of models for this army that are maybe $80 for 10 of them. Well, all of a sudden I'm like, well, I could justify paying significantly less money for newer kits that still look great, that maybe don't fit perfectly, but I get a lot more of them. I could justify doing that, So I mean, that kind of stuff. So we'll see how obviously the prices matter, and the bits in the kit matter, and all that for what you can do with it. So, but I have some plans cooking. So
it's funny is speaking of new kits. So like I know like Space Wolves for 40k are now in everybody's hands, and I think the rest of the models are now on pre-order or coming to pre-order soon.
Right. I think the box set is out.
Yeah, the box set's out,
and the rest of the stuff is pre-order next weekend. I think is what it is.
So the characters that have been updated, including the spectacular Logan.
Yep.
And then, so this was a sneaky bit that I had caught, and maybe they did that on purpose. Might have been an oops, but people might remember that we had a recent Killteam release. One half of that box included the hyper-adapted Raveners.
Right.
So they were 5 very unique-looking Raveners, and they were given their own profile on the 40k side proper. And that's how they function. Is each of the 5 has like a slightly different weapon loadout, but they're all one unit. And like many Killteam units, they have a points cost for it, and you can take them in 40k. But then they also updated the data sheet for the regular Raveners. And what was interesting about that is forever, since the models came out, they've been a unit of 3+, basically.
Right.
And depending on the edition, you could either do 3 to 18 when they were really dumb about that, or you could do 3 to 6, was most recent, I think. But the kit's been unavailable online for a long time. And it was a plastic kit.
Were they, okay, I was going to say, were they plastic?
Yeah, they're plastic.
Okay.
But it was a kit that for a long time we talked about potentially when 10th was launching and Tyranids were getting a big feature, that might be a kit that gets looked at because it's showing its age. It came out like 5th ed, and it was, they have the old warrior crest, and they have these like chunky upper bodies with the funny thorax weapons, right? Well, then they gave us this new profile, and it came in the app, and it was all of a sudden now the unit was 5 models, not 3+, not 3 to 6. And I was like, well, that's different. And then the picture they have in the app, for those of you who have it, is a different Ravener model than what we have.
Right.
Slimmer, fits the current aesthetic a little better, no thorax weapon, and their weapon profile, they don't even have a shooting weapon option. They just have melee weapons. Now they've gotten a stats tweak to where they're fightier, but it's a 5-man unit now. And then the Killteam hyper adapted Ravener unit has its own 40k profile. And those, when you look at the models for them, are very different than what the picture for this new Ravener looks like. So either that kit makes 2 versions, or there's a new Ravener kit coming that they just haven't announced yet.
But they already released the rules, and they already released the
Yeah.
picture and the art and everything.
Yeah.
And they kind of like miss, they missed up their organization of like
I feel like
release versus updates. You know.
Yeah, and they showed us what is a picture essentially of a new model,
Right.
but they didn't make an announcement, or maybe I missed it. I mean,
I don't remember seeing anything about it.
And on the website right now, on the Warhammer.com, which is the store page, they still only show the old 3-man Ravener kit, and it's just out of stock. So, who knows?
It's a very weird thing to notice.
Yeah, that might be something they're dropping in.
Yeah.
And again, the picture they have under the standard Ravener data sheet is a very different Ravener than the 5 Killteam guys.
Right.
So, like I said, it's either a dual kit or there's going to be a separate one.
Well, and like you said, the amount of things that are coming out recently with the Space Wolves and the, all the Knight stuff, and then now we've got
Knights and Chaos Knights, all that,
all this stuff. It's easy to have pushed back stuff in the release windows, but still have like updates scheduled.
Yeah,
you know what I mean. When we saw even like the AOS side, right? Like we've got information about what's coming out for Idoneth Deepkin, but like it was a trickle, right? We had like, we put in an article some of these new models that are coming out before we even announced that there were new models coming out.
Yeah.
Whoops. So they've released a couple of articles and showed off some of that stuff, but they never gave us a Battletome picture. They never gave us a finality, an ending.
We don't have to pre-order yet for them, right?
And so it's like, well, we were under the impression that maybe there would even be more than what they showed. But it's really weird staggered releases because they had to release sort of an acknowledgement to what leaked by themselves.
Yeah.
But only what they was leaked by themselves. Like they're not going to give us more information than what was leaked. It was the same kind of thing with what was it when Sanguinor was shown off around Christmas for Blood Angels in 40k.
Yeah.
That model, was it Sanguinor? Was it Dante? Was it?
Well, this last Blood Angels one was Sanguinor.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yes.
And the guy who executes them at the end.
Yes. But one model was teased because it was leaked, and they gave it out on Christmas Day. And it was like, angels have come home for Christmas or whatever.
Yeah.
Kind of thing. But there was a lot more that came out for Blood Angels after that, but they had to acknowledge the thing that was leaked.
Yep.
But that's all they touched. I think it's a very similar thing here, where it's like, here's the things we accidentally leaked by on our own, but there's tongue-in-cheek, there's more coming without even saying so.
Yeah, and we... and one pattern that... Now, we knew Idoneth Deepkin were on the roadmap somewhere, but... vaguely, and we've noticed a pattern that usually if the army's only getting a character, they will show you a picture of the Codex or Battletome, and then tell you when to expect pre-orders, or it'll say pre-orders coming soon.
Right.
With Idoneth, they haven't done that. They've now shown us 3 models.
3 kits.
And still no picture of the Battletome and no...
additional information.
Yeah.
No.
So they might be getting more of a release, but you're right. It could be something leaked, something disrupted their release schedule, and so they're just like trickling this out like a tease. Who knows? But the Ravener thing was a catch that I haven't seen anyone talk about yet, and I was like, well, that seems interesting.
Well, because it's not obvious either. If you're not going into the Ravener, data sheet, how would you ever notice?
Yep.
Because the Raveners really aren't played right now. The models are not worth collecting.
Well, and I think this was an opportunity, both the balanced data slate on 40K side and this General's Handbook update on Age of Sigmar side, where they did more than just this unit's not getting played, let's lower its points. There were whole rules for units that they went in and like, this unit's just not working. Let's try to give it a role that's
right.
And the Raveners, when you read them now, they don't have their like shooting weapon. They don't. Now their tunnel thing is more interesting, and now there's a whole detachment that can take advantage of it.
Yeah.
And now they're a unit of 5, and now they're fightier, but they don't shoot anything. They're faster. So I think they were trying to like just change this unit because it's always in a weird spot of like, well, I could take Gene Stealers because they fight better and they have an invuln, or I could take Warriors because they shoot better and they have better armor. So you never took Raveners unless they just made them dirt cheap. So now they gave them like what feels like just a rework.
Right.
And so maybe the kit's a part of that. And it just like, it wasn't even a leak because it's in their own product.
Right.
Their app, they just haven't talked about it. So I don't know. And I don't think that's a mistake. That was clearly a picture of a new model, but then the Killteam models are also pictured in there. So,
right.
So the Idoneth might be, we speculated that Idoneth might have more coming.
Yeah. Hopefully. And I hope so. Because again, it's this weird lack of attention of like second wave for most of the unique armies for Age of Sigmar, right? Like the unique armies that have come out, when I say unique, I mean like post
didn't exist in Warhammer Fantasy, right. Totally new to Age of Sigmar.
Nothing from any of these lines were carried over from a previous game. They don't really get touched on like a second wave. They haven't yet. Most of them, right? The only one I think was maybe Lumineth.
Yeah, Lumineth have had 3 waves total.
Lumineth is a weird spot, right? Because when they first came out, their army wasn't a functional army. When they first came out, it was like...
It was a big box set with...
Well, here's your horsemen and your spears and your bows. And then you've got Teclis and a hero.
Yeah.
And that was pretty much it. But since then, it's had... You've got the river people that came out for Warcry, which are part of the army. You had the Stone Temple. You had the Wind Riders and the Wind, the Tornado Fox.
Yep.
Like you've had more temples come out with. So they've gotten like 2 or 3, 2.5 kind of waves.
Pretty good expansions.
But that's the only army that's gotten that.
Yeah.
Fire Slayers have gotten 4 characters in a row with their updates.
That's it. Yeah.
That's it. Like
Kharadron's
I guess
got like
they do
character.
have the Flamekeeper, Underworld Warband or Warcry Warband, whatever. But everyone's got a Warcry Warband.
Right.
You know what I mean? Lumineth or Idoneth? Nothing.
It's been a character.
I mean, when they were first announced, it was like, here's a release: turtle, shark, eels. Well, it's still just turtle, shark, eels. Like that's all they still have. That's the whole army. So I would love it if they got an expansion, they got an update, they got more to their roster. I like we've defined kind of what the bare minimum for an army roster should be in the past. If you want to go look that up, I don't remember where we talked about it. Go watch them all, and you'll find it eventually. But we've kind of defined what the bare minimum for a functional army should be, and a lot of these armies do not meet those requirements.
No, and it really drives me nuts. I know it means more models and more purchases and more assembly and more painting for what I'm about to say, but I really wish that kits of units were the new releases more often for those armies and not just another hero.
Right.
Because it's like, well, cool, for Ossiarch Bonereapers, you make 1 infantry kit, but you're going to release another character that changes what that 1 infantry kit does.
Right.
Like, give us another infantry kit.
Right.
Give us and Fire Slayers have been way overdue because they were one of the first armies released in the first edition of the game, and all they've gotten is characters since. And
it's insane to me too, because it's like they've teased little bits, right, of like, hey, here's these alternate game modes that still function, these feature these same armies. We're gonna tease to you these little things that we could be doing, like hey, Bonereaper armies, here's a single archer in one of these Underworld warbands. Oh, hey, Fire Slayers, here are juvenile magma droths that we could be including in your army. Oh, hey, Idoneth players, we have foot Achilleans that we could be releasing for your army, which would be heavy armored, elite, the living, soul-possessing elves as opposed to like the pale thralls. That other side of the army. Here's someone foot for an Underworld warband. It's like, yeah, okay, cool, you can do all this stuff. Oh, hey, Skaven players. Remember how you were hoping Eshin would get an update? Here's an Underworld warband, and it's banned. Just immediate. It was out for like 4 months, and all of a sudden it's cut from the game to Legends.
Yep.
So the coolest models, right? The all the different assassins and like gone. It's like, I'm glad Skaven got an update, but I think they focused a little too hard on some of the lesser clans that people aren't that interested in. Going so hard into Clan Mulder was like, whose favorite clan is that? Fucking nobody's.
Well,
right? Like, the Hell Pit Abomination was neat, sure, but I don't need another Abomination.
Well, what it feels like to me is when we see these specialist games do these alternate designs for armies that exist, it's like, well, the design studio clearly has creativity.
Right.
And they come up with these ideas, and then it's almost just like they looked at it and they're like, just make those 4 designs you had, put them in a unit, we'll make it an Underworld's warband instead of making 4 units that could be built off those. And I hate to use this word because a lot of people do. It's like lazy design. It's like, well, it's very creative design. It's the follow through then that why isn't this expanded on? When Idoneth, we know that at least they're getting more than one character.
Right.
And we beat this horse. But like when Fire Slayers come back around, don't give them a 5th character in a row and no new units. When you get to Kharadrons, don't give them another guy wearing a balloon and no new units. Like, for crying out loud.
I agree.
Yeah, it's so easy. One kit of infantry, one kit of cavalry, that makes 2 things, and you expand an army greatly.
Yep.
That's it. Yeah. I don't know. Don't know what the thought is there. But I hope for Idoneth there's more. I hope it's not just these, and then they're like, here's the book. We can't get the other stuff out in time. You're going to wait for whatever.
Yep.
And in the meantime, I'm sure we'll get 4 more articles about Saturnine dreadnoughts.
Yep.
By the way,
which is a cool looking model.
I was going to say,
I'm
in the rare camp where I like the look of the Saturnine pattern stuff.
Yep.
Because it harkens to a really old design that did exist at one time.
But here's the thing: they have facelifted that design so heavily, that it's almost unrecognizable. I mean, there are design points there that like you look at it, you're like, oh yeah, okay. It's an updated version of that. Because if you look at the original Saturnine dreadnoughts, they were stupid. They looked like those stupid golden aliens from Fifth Element. Remember that movie?
Yep.
Those guys that just dirtled around and like were supposed to save the planet, whatever. Like those guys. That's what Saturnine dreadnoughts look like to me. They were so silly looking.
Well,
with shoulder pads that went like, they extended their body, like doubled the size of their body because their shoulders were so high.
Yep.
So ridiculous. The new ones are still exaggerated proportions, but they actually look like maybe they're functional. Maybe a person can actually fit in there.
They wove in some details that suggest that those are the force field generators of the Saturnine pattern. And then they've also got a little bit of that Hulkbuster suit thing going where it's like a suit within a suit.
Yeah.
And so I am okay with it. You're right. Even the original Terminators that were like that, where it just looked like they were shrugging really high, like they just didn't really answer any question. And like,
like the ones from Space Hulk.
Yeah. They're just like, what?
Yep.
They're single piece metal.
The original Badger face Terminators. Yep.
And this is like, it is a little goofy and over the top, but the Warhammer universes are.
Yeah.
I think they look neat. I think from a painting perspective, they look super cool.
Mm-hmm.
I think you could use the Saturnine Terminators if you wanted to convert them to replace the Centurion kits that are starting to show some age.
I'd say they're probably about the same size.
I think they're close. Yeah. I need to see them in person, but I think they're on like 50s or something big.
Yeah.
I've seen them next to other Terminators, and they've scaled up to current Terminators. So,
yep.
But anywho, I think between between Horus Heresy and Cathay, that's eaten up a lot of production, which might have had an effect on their other games. And the models look neat, but I always just see them as conversion potential. But,
which I mean, even like the Knights and Chaos Knights update was a little like.
You added another variant to the existing kit.
Oh, it's the same knight, like 90% of the same knight. You just have a different weapon in your hand
and different head, typically.
Yeah. But they did actually, in terms of rules, really update that army.
They did.
In terms of like shaking up what they can do, right? Because there is more room within your army roster because the points are decreasing on most of the knights. The knights are survivable versus certain weapons more so than they were previously because their wounds have gone up.
Correct.
And then their toughness has gone down, which generally in 40K there are what we call breaking points.
Yep.
Right, where there are certain numbers that compare to one another that are important comparisons, right? So it's like if you have a strength that's equal to a toughness, half of a toughness, or double a toughness, those are important breaking points.
Yep.
With the new knight's toughness going from 12 down to 11, that modifies some of the breaking points now. So now something like a strength 6 weapon is going to wound on 5s instead of 6s. A strength 12 weapon will now be on 3s instead of 4s. But for a lot of weapons that aren't those specific numbers, it matters not. You know what I mean?
Okay.
So like a strength 9 or 10 gun is still going to wound him on a 5 no matter what. Anything from strength 12 to 22 or 12 to 21 are still going to wound them on 3s.
Yeah.
There's not a lot of weapons this is going to affect because there's not a lot of weapons in that strength 6 kind of range. There's not a lot of weapons in that strength 12 range. But like assault cannons and las cannons now all of a sudden are different when it comes to this armor. But the fact that small amount of breaking point change allows you to discount the knights means that like knights now are kind of more viable, especially when you come up against like dedicated anti-tank weapons, because all of a sudden it's like your armor, your wound rolls, your hit rolls, whatever against you aren't changing at all. But now all of a sudden you've got a bigger health pool. Yep. So you survive a little longer, and also you cost less.
And I'm going to wager maybe there was a lazy approach, but I wonder if the wound pool change, there was some math that like whatever the wounds change to, if that like on average adds half a turn or a turn to their survivability kind of thing,
yeah, I mean,
which could be huge. Because it's funny is like we've talked at length about Imperial Knights and then Chaos Knights and why they've had such trouble making them work, because they either are the eternal gatekeeper of an edition, where half the armies can't get through them and half the armies can, or they just are bad. Right. That's like their two places typically, because they just end up overpriced. One of them dies, and now their army can't.
There were certain editions of the game where like they just couldn't fit places because their bases were too big. So like you'd have whole tables of like terrain where they were narrow streets that the knights can't fit through. And so it's like you lose that game because if you can't break through to the center of the battlefield, like you're not going to win.
Yeah, or they're just strafing down a street, but then they're not covered by anything, and they just get obliterated. And then other armies can get to that objective marker and score for 2 turns, and they're always in a weird spot. This is pretty big when you're changing the actual stat line of an army midway through an edition. We'll see if that helps them out. Maybe they'll find that sweet spot where they're kind of balanced. I still wish they weren't in the game, but like as a standalone army. Yep. But I don't know. Maybe this will be better for them. It's interesting that you talk about that breaking point for weapons versus toughness, because 40K in every edition gets to a state like that where it feels like the weapon choices become automatic or solved.
Right.
Because of those breaking points, and it's always one of two decisions. It's always either there's a weapon that throws out so many bullets that has special rules that means it has no bad targets, so that gets picked everywhere, or whatever the best anti-tank, anti-monster gun is gets spammed everywhere.
Right.
Because they'll take their flat 5 huge AP for decent cost that can shoot a knight the same that it can shoot a space marine. And I think they've done enough to shake it up where that never where we're not getting stuck on picking the same weapons. And so maybe something like this is impactful. Because now if a lot of armies at the top, let's say, have to consider knights an issue because the weapon you always took on them is now like...
Right. Well, because that it ends up being like, well, I'm paying this premium for a strength 12 gun when I could pay less points for a strength 11 gun, which I don't think exists. But, but the point remains, right, where it's like you were paying a premium before. Or I was taking a strength 14 gun so I could wound knights on 3s, but now I can take a strength 12 gun to wound knights on 3s. Yep. That means I save points. I'm still wounding that same number now. Instead of a 4, I'm wounding them a 3 with that strength 12. Now all of a sudden I can shake it up a little bit and save some points. But I mean, it could have the opposite effect too, right? Where it's like, well, now you're taking a lot more strength 12 guns and less strength 14. Well, maybe now you can't deal with other armies as well.
Yeah, and right? You can also have the armies that do the bargain shopping on the other end, where they're like, well, I took a bunch of the strength 6 gun that has 1 billion shots, but it's got crits on whatever.
Yeah, shuriken cannons, I think, or strength 6,
where it does like a crit mortal
or
or something,
lasers,
or auto wounds on a 6, and so they could still then shoot those at knights. But now with the new math of the wound pool, it's like, well, I could usually in one turn fire my 4 of those at it and take it down. Now I need 2 turns to get it on average. Is that as worth it now? Maybe I need to add more variety to my gun choices. Shoot, I have to take a more expensive gun. So there's a chance, and maybe I'm hoping for too much out of that little change, but but then we also got the balance data slate gave us a bunch of new points, right? So I don't know. Why not shake it up? Even when the game seems like it's in a good place, I like this mid-season. Let's change what people are doing.
There's some, I mean, because it is a patch, right? It's a patch that comes out just like for a video game.
Yep.
Like we got one for Total War coming out that shakes up things a lot. This is a patch for this tabletop game, and what we see is in good balance. Is a shake-up to certain levels of the game, right? Where it's like, we don't want, if an army's not performing very well in the hands of amateur players, right? It's only performing too well in the realm of competitive high-level gameplay. We want to target a change to the army that will affect that high-level gameplay, but not affect it for the people who aren't piloting who aren't at that skill level. Right, there's like a difference, right? Because if you nerf an army altogether, just across the board, you will then affect it at low levels of play too.
Yep. Right,
which sucks because if you're already struggling to win with your army as a new player, and all of a sudden it gets nerfed and you're winning even less, that feels horrible.
It does.
But if you target a change so specific that it will only affect high level play, you will knock down their win percentage at high levels, but a regular player will not notice it. Right. Those are the greatest kinds of changes, in my opinion. Those are the ones that are clever and they're effective.
I saw something, speaking of that difference between casual and high-level play, they were talking, and it went around on maybe Instagram or something, and it went kind of viral, and someone was asking about terrain. And they were saying, like, I wish the tables were back to where the scenery was about looking cool and immersive and not about rules balance. And it was like, well... First of all, you can always do that in your games of Warhammer.
Right, exactly.
You can always build a table how you want. You can have the terrain on it you want. If you're talking about at tournaments, like no, you have to think about footprints, heights, and you have to think about what people can practice on and get used to.
Well, we also want every table, so it's fair, to be basically the same terrain loadout. So you're not getting screwed up. How many times have we gone to tournaments where like you go to and play on a cool table in a tournament, like an actual tournament, and you're like, well, this table just screws me over because I happen to draw the one with the 9x15 box in the center of it. Because we've had that where it's like, this is a cool table, but why is a third of the table taken up with like an ammo crate basically in the center of the table to block line of sight?
Or why is every single piece of terrain identified in a way that infantry can go in, magic box it, and shoot out, but vehicles can't do anything?
I mean, I've seen ones where it's like, oh, there are no buildings on this table. It is literally all forest.
Yeah.
Where it's just like, aquarium, plants. Just that's the whole table. It's like, literally, it's just grass everywhere. There is no line of sight blocking.
And
we've had tournaments like that.
And we've talked about, for high-level play, you have to get the rules for the miniatures to kind of ignore the actual three-dimensional aspects of the miniature. In terrain, it's kind of the same.
Right.
It's like if you're talking about fairness, balance, and what you can practice on and make it equal for everybody at that level, you have to kind of ignore the immersion of the game,
right,
and make the rules as sterile as possible. As you have to have set measurements, set base sizes, set profiles for units and terrain, and that includes terrain.
Mm-hmm.
When you're talking about your casual games,
do whatever you want.
Do whatever you want.
Exactly. And
if your big thing is you want to build a basement-style toy railroad set level of mountains and people, and then go nuts and play your game on that.
I mean, and I kind of think that needs to be talked about too. Is so how to approach this? They're toys. I'll throw it out there, right?
They're toys.
This is toys. This is a hobby. And this goes in two aspects. One of it is I kind of want to touch that, like, every hobby doesn't need to be monetized.
No.
So because you're good at painting your models doesn't mean you need to start selling them.
No.
I will say that right out the gate. And once you assemble your models, they will lose value. Okay? Like, that's just how it is, right? You don't get into a hobby for resale value. I want to preface that for one aspect of it this way. And the second one is, because they're toys and they're your toys, you can do whatever you want to with them. Okay?
Yep.
That includes things like painting them however you want to, assembling however you want to, making one model count as a different model, as long as it's a believable thing, right?
Yep.
Like, all of that is allowed. And if you show up to play with somebody and there's like, well, that model's not the right one, you can't play with it, you should not be playing with that person.
No.
Because they do not because that person's not worth playing against, but because that person is not in the game for the same aspect as you are.
No.
You converted a model to look cool, and they said, you can't use your cool thing, even though you're telling me what it is, and I understand what it is and what it's supposed to be. Because it's not the right thing, you're not allowed to use it. You can't tell me what I'm not allowed to use.
Yeah.
Especially
don't play with them.
when it's completely reasonable. Yep. So, but I wanna take a minute to, like, bring that out, right? As these are toys. And if you have an idea to make one unique and one that's cool, absolutely you should do it.
Yep.
If you want to buy these new Tyranid dreadnoughts and Terminators and use them in your other games, yes, 100% do it.
Yep.
If it's a believable, a reasonable conversion, whatever, yes, do it. No one's going to stop you.
Nope.
If you want to paint your army white and gold and say they're Ultramarines, do it. Right? Like, yes, you can do that. There's no problems with that. And no one should have any problems with that. As long as you're making it clear that, like, this is how I'm playing these. 100%.
Yep.
And so, like, you should not need, as a hobbyist, permission from other players to do cool stuff with your models.
Yep.
You know? So, I soapboxy a little bit. I mean,
I think we both did there.
because there's so many questions that I hear that are like that. Like, am I allowed to use this model as this other one? Yeah, you are. Like, who's telling you no? You know what I mean? Like,
Right.
Why do you even have to ask that? Like, this is the hobby side of it is all about art. It's all about creativity. Yes, you know what? Like, I'll be mad if you don't customize your model and you just build them straight out of the box. You know, like, yeah, do cool stuff with it. 100%.
Yep.
So that's my take.
Yeah. Well, and I even think that when the question was posed, when I saw it, and it's a content creator I follow and like their work, but that question seemed odd to me about, like, oh, should there be more casual terrain? And it was like, it was trying to say that by Games Workshop defining terrain types and table arrangements for matched play, they were, like, telling you can't do this. And it's like,
Right.
I don't like that question implies that, because that's not what Games Workshop's doing.
Correct. Yeah.
It's the fact that matched and tournament play require strict boundaries to function in a way that's fair.
Yeah. Yeah. So in the same way that you can play with whatever models however you
Right.
want to, you can play with whatever terrain however you want to. You can make a battle set on an imperial world where there's ramparts and stationary guns, like it was a defense.
And it's
of
a hive city. Yeah.
Yes, you can play on that. You will not have an asymmetric, or you will have you will not have a symmetrical deployment. You
Right.
won't have symmetrical starting zones one person that starts uphill might have a huge advantage.
Yep.
But guess what? That's how a lot of battles are. And if you want to play narrative battles that way, that are really fucking cool, you might not even have armies that are the same size. I've seen phenomenal games played, like, especially like on YouTube channels and stuff, where it's like, here's 5,000 points of Imperial army, and they will play against an infinite number of Tyranids.
Yeah.
That constantly replenish on the other side of the battlefield. You kill them, the unit respawns on the other side of the battle and charges at you. You need to survive as long as possible to defend the planet. Do you think there's a scenario in a matched play book somewhere that describes that?
No.
Absolutely not. But you know what? Those are the best kind of games to play because that's super cool.
Yep.
So,
and yeah, that's always available to you. If you have a way you want to play, that has never gone away.
Right.
And if the argument, if it's an argument, I guess, if it then moves to, well, why doesn't match play give ... It's like, because that's why they have narrative play and league play, and that's why they have all those other ones.
Right.
Or play however you want.
Right. If you don't like a rule because you think it's busted, talk with your opponent and say, we're not playing with this rule.
Yep. Now,
You can do that. That will change the balance because you're using points to balance your games. Some of those effects are baked into those costs. Just know that you will change the balance of a game if you start taking away rules from one side or the other.
Yeah. And if you go to a tournament, then you need to really manage your own expectations. Like, tournaments have rules.
And you know what? Like, for me, I've realized I'm not a tournament player. I don't want to go play in tournaments, like serious ones. But that's something an expectation that I've had to deal with and manage. That it's like, it's too much time. I don't want to spend a full day playing. I want quality, like good quality games. I don't want a lot of reps and a lot of games.
Yeah,
to play
well, for me, what happened is I know if I'm going to do a tournament level anything, not just Warhammer, I'm going to prepare like crazy, research like crazy, get in the reps, so that I can go in and be prepared for any situation. And it's like, well, that level of investment in time and resources, and then knowing that when you get to the tournament, you might not only have to play all day, you might have to play 3 days in a row, morning to dusk, doing that. And so for me, it's just, I do love it in concept, but I don't see myself prepping that way for an event anytime soon. Right. Some people live for that. Some people do.
You've also got a problem with, like, not playing with models that look good. You can't do.
I have a problem with that.
You know what I mean? So, like, if you're going to play and you're going to go all out, your army needs to match in a way. The quality of the paint job needs to match, like, the quality of the army you're playing.
Yep.
And generally for tournament play, you have a very short turnaround for, here's the rules pack, come up with a list, submit your list, show up with a tournament, ready army to an event.
That is also painted.
That's also painted. That's what I mean, like tournament ready in terms of like paint job.
Yep.
Well, tabletop paint jobs they're not a high standard.
They're not.
They really aren't. But it feels bad as a hobbyist being like, I can't show up with just tabletop ready models. And so it ends up having to be a perfect storm. If it's like you have to decide you want to play in a tournament, it has to be a tournament where the rules, the rule packet works for you, the timing of the weekend works out, the list you're bringing has to be like competitive. It has to be an army you own and it's competitive in that scene, and then you have to have the models ready to go.
And you got to have the reps in,
and like. The models you have painted better be the ones that are good, and then you're bringing in your list, and then you need to practice like hell with it. And so it's like it is a lot to do.
It is
to the point where it's like, man, if you're a hobbyist, it's almost like you can't also be a tournament player. And so it is so impressive to me when people show up with phenomenally painted armies, because like I can't fathom it. Yeah. Right, it is so much time invested in both aspects of this hobby.
Well, and there are some who will go to a commission painter or commission studio, get their army painted really nice, by a team of people, and they'll do that because they know they don't have the time. But even then, there still is something impressive about the fact that they chose their 2,000 points to get painted. What if when they're playtesting, they're like, these 3 units got to change?
Exactly.
Like,
That's what I'm saying. Like, committing to like the list and having it be functional and then have it all painted and then not having to change it to add more to it or paint new stuff. Like, just like, here's your full list completely painted is just bizarre. It's wild to me.
Yeah. That is one of the fun things of walking around like Adepticon when the people have display boards and then their armies are painted to a high standard. And it could be a studio that did it. It could be themselves who did it. But that is, to me, super impressive.
Right.
Speaking of, on that hobby site, what were you working on last when we were on here?
Oh, who knows? Such a long time ago. Let's see. The Soulblight Gravelord stuff came out.
Okay.
So I got all that stuff assembled.
Cool. Was that Death Rattle mostly?
So like So the Death Rattle was the original release, which came in the box set, but they also released, aside from that, a bunch of vampire stuff.
Oh yeah.
So they had like the endless spells, and they had the terrain. They had the vampire on horse, and then they had Prince Vordry. Yeah. So I've got all that stuff assembled and primed, and all that stuff is ready to be painted. I haven't painted it yet. Mostly because last weekend we did a board game night, and so that ate up some of my time. And I've been prepping for next weekend game night kind of thing, where we're actually going to play a D&D board game potentially. Okay. And I can't just have injection molding bare plastic models on the table, even if it's just a board game night. You know, like if they can be painted, they must be painted. You know what I mean? And so like I've been working a little bit on that. It's a fantasy, what's it, Steamforged game? Yeah, Steamforged game called Bard Sung, which is very if you've played D&D, you'd be very familiar with the mechanics of this game. So we may or may not try to crack that out and play that a little bit. So. But there's like baddies and heroes and stuff that all come with that game that all need to be primed and painted. I've got them all Zenithal primed at the moment, but I have an expansion that I haven't touched yet with terms of painting, and so it's trying to get that ready in a week might or might not happen. So we shall see.
I'll be back to the painting table this week, thankfully. I've got some stuff I'm going to post already, but I'm going to do more sort of beginner-friendly tutorials for how to use the Chimera paints that I've got arranged.
So are you also demonstrating just basic painting techniques in addition to using this paint?
Yep, it's the way I'm trying to unfold it in bites, and then I think I'll make a bigger collection of it that may end up in the form of a PDF or even on a Patreon or something.
Sure.
Is like at first I showed just the base set and the expansion set number 1 and how they just dilute with water because they're pigment and not hobby paint.
Right.
The reason I didn't choose to do this also with the Chimera artist sets, because they have all these signature series artist sets that are little groups of 6 paints that some phenomenal artist chose. Those ones do function more like regular hobby paints, but the base and expansion set don't. So what I was showing is how they dilute with water. Now what I'm going to do is show what happens when you mix them each with adding white or black, which a lot of hobby paints have mixed in them already, or even a medium. And then I'll do maybe little color reels that show mixing these colors and how with these 2 sets you can really create pretty much anything.
Yeah.
And then I think from there what we'll do is techniques with them, everything from texture. Texture might be a big one. Show how to get texture with either stippling or lines or hatching, and then and who knows from there.
So can you do most painting techniques that we're familiar with these paints?
Yeah. So there was a picture that I posted last week on my Instagram, Llama Paints Minis, and it was just it was like 6 days ago, and all I showed was just a blade of an axe head, and that was using entirely just Chimera paints, and I was mostly using textures in the form of super fine lines. And what I think I'll do is create a video where I show how to load the brush for that. Because one area when I've worked with some new painters, and I got to work with someone who's not as experienced as I am, and one of the areas that I notice is sometimes they just have never learned how to prep their paint on the palette.
Sure.
Or how to load the brush for something. And so they just, the paint is on their palette. They just dip the tip of the brush in and then they start going. And how come I can't get this to look like that? And now some of it will come down to just experience and feel.
Mm-hmm.
Some of it comes down to how did you dilute it based on how much you're going to load on the brush, how big is the brush head you're using, all the way to like how much pressure to apply with the brush.
Mm-hmm.
And so when I was teaching this individual to do some really fine lines, which they might post some pictures of their own later, but it was like, prepped the paint on the palette, then loaded the brush the way they would just for like layers, and then the first attempt to do a really fine line, it all of a sudden was like, well, pressed with the brush head a certain way. All of a sudden that line, it's not only a little fatter, but it's like transparent in the center and the pigment pushes out to the edge, right? And it's like, that doesn't look like that just whisker hair that you did on yours. And so I completed the axe head using just the Chimera paints and those techniques with fine textures. And people can go check it out, again, on my Instagram and see what that looks like. And then maybe I'll do not even a tutorial necessarily on NMM, which is what that was, but how that particular texture technique can be used for a bunch of different things. But yeah, so I really like this beginner stuff because I think paints like Chimera paints or even artist quality tube acrylics intimidate people in the hobby, because if you think of like when we started in the hobby, it was just people who played games who had to learn how to paint.
Right.
And then now you have artists in there, and we've talked about that at length.
I mean, it's artists that have started in other mediums who have come to miniatures. And it's like, well, that's...
And they find a learning curve, but then they up the game because they understand all these other ideas. And Chimera paints intimidate people, or any full-bodied acrylic intimidates them because they don't behave in the super easy, user-friendly way that your Citadel paints, your Vallejo paints, your Army Painter paints, your Monument Hobbies paints. But they kind of do when you just learn a few tricks with them. Mm-hmm. And so that's what I've been doing, is just all this I have all these like sheets of watercolor paper that just look like a mess because I'm just experimenting with them.
Well, then it also ends up being like, well, the paint seems kind of expensive and it's not ready to go and I got to learn it. It's like, so there's all those aspects too, but it's like, but if it's easy and you've got a tube acrylic that can make 4 or 5 pots worth of paint out of it for, maybe just under double. Like, that's not that bad.
Well, and the same with these. Like, yes, we are an affiliate with Chimera. That's not why I talk about them. I wouldn't want to be if I didn't find the use for them.
Honestly, if I didn't think I met someone who wanted to paint and didn't think they were ready for this kind of thing because of just how I know that they paint, I wouldn't recommend them this.
Yeah.
I'm not, no offense to anyone listening, but it's like, this isn't for everybody.
It isn't.
If you're a beginner painter, if you're a tabletop painter and you just want to get things done quick, this is not the right paint for you. This is artistry material, right?
Yeah.
Like, these are for trying to up your game a little bit,
or
to really put some effort in.
Or if you were new into the game, and let's say you bought a set, maybe you got a store nearby that carries it, or you ordered it online, or you were at a con and they were there, and you bought them, and you were like not getting a feel for them right away. That's what I'm hoping these little reels and videos are going to help people with. And
because we wouldn't want to make you feel like you were like you wasted your money and this product's useless for you.
Here's how to get it.
That feels bad.
And to your earlier point, in terms of the amount, they are 30 ml bottles, which are big compared to most of the hobby ones, which are like 18 or 20, maybe 25. But they're pretty big. And again, you put that dollop on there, and it goes a long way once you're diluting it. And so. So I've got more of that coming up now that I'm back to a regularly scheduled program this week. So I'm excited to show some of that off, because the more I make for people to see, the more I've been learning on them, and then finding new things or even old things that I can now do new ways with these. Plus some of the mixtures you can get, just create colors. And you want to talk about overwhelming. Using a paint like this can be, using an artist product can be. It's also overwhelming to walk into a store and they've got a Vallejo game rack, or they've got a Army Painter rack, or they've got a Citadel rack, and it's like, there's 500 paints on that rack.
Yeah.
Do I actually have to get all these colors if I want? Or?
Well, you want a base coat with this one, and you want to do a layer with this one, you want to highlight with this one, and you want to mix this one.
Wash with this one,
so
and
like,
then,
I need 5 paints to do green.
Right.
It's like, that does feel
bad. To do just warm green, not even cold green.
Right.
Or,
and so, like, if you can get a few paints and learn how to mix the colors yourselves if you're interested in that, you can create all those colors.
Yeah.
You don't need to have separate individual products.
Now, now don't get me wrong. If you're like me, who's a paint addict and will buy all the paints all the time, then whatever. But what I've been learning with these, and what I hope I can teach newer painters or people who are just inexperienced with this kind of paint, is how you can do with just a handful.
Mm-hmm.
You can get most of what you need out of it and make them go a long way. And I think if you get comfortable with that, you could then later actually pick up a pot of anything and make it work.
Yeah. I mean, we even have done that kind of challenge on our own to challenge ourselves. That's here's your limited amount of paints you have available. Make a model work with it.
Yeah.
You know, you've got these 5 paints plus black and white. Go use just these to make the model happen.
Yep.
And that's when you limit yourself with what you've got available, you do have to get creative. You do have to
experiment.
Absolutely. I mean, and then figure out that, like, well, hey, maybe I don't need X color to make, Y item work. I can cheat it and paint it any color, and it can kind of work, with the right mood, the right lighting, the right whatever. Like, I can make all kinds of weird things work with different colors that I maybe I only have a few available to me. So
yeah,
it goes beyond just doing the right coloring within the lines.
Yeah,
right. It's more than that. And again, you have to want to try it.
Yep.
But hopefully this will make more people want to try it.
Yeah,
because it isn't as intimidating as it seems.
Yeah, and even the first 2 that I did, which just showed them diluted with water on a sheet of watercolor paper. I had someone who I don't know who just simply complimented. There was a Twitch stream for a random painter that I was watching, and my name was in the chat, and they complimented the reels that I posted. So it was like they had seen them, and it was those little things are. It's not that I'm looking for that. I'm looking for people who, like I said, have looked at paints like this or tried to use them and didn't know what to do with them, and like, here's a really simple thing that shows.
Right.
Because I don't think there's a. I think there's a place to help a lot of new painters, since this is a hobby that's growing way beyond what it just used to be, which was people who played games. But you were talking quickly about painting miniatures for a role-playing scenario.
Yeah.
And we have a convention where those 2 worlds cross over coming up.
Yes, we
in
do.
a little more than a month, 5-6 weeks.
Gen Con is coming up very soon. Woof.
Yeah.
And again, it's one of those ones that's, for us, at least, it's less stressful because we're going just to hang out.
Yep.
Right? Like, we're not participating in anything specific. There's not, like, a strict schedule of classes and tournaments and events and stuff like this. We're just going to hang out. Hang out in Indianapolis, go to the convention maybe every day, maybe not.
Yep.
Maybe there's some days we won't go, but go hang out, see what cool stuff there is, meet people. Obviously, if you see us and you recognize us somehow, come say hi. Whatever. Like, we're there to both.
We'll sometimes play demo games. We'll
sure.
Of course, visit every stall.
We're there to see what new stuff there is.
Yep.
And try new stuff. And if we find something neat, we'll definitely recommend it. I love picking up one-off board games and role-playing games and things like that. I'll usually pick up a handful of models and miniatures, just because you don't usually get to see all the companies in person every time you go to the game store, because game stores are finite and they can only carry so much stuff. So like, I do a different focus, kind of things I want to buy. But
I'm always interested in the last few years to see what elements of the miniature hobby have now bled into Gen, because we've watched that grow.
Yeah.
Where now stores, even like Game Envy, Monument, all those now show up there.
Well, I think part of it is there's so many like board games now that have, maybe it's because of technology, but there's the visual element of board games are now miniatures as opposed to cutouts,
piece of cardstock or whatever.
Cardstock, basically, Candyland cutouts
right.
on stands,
on a stand, yeah.
That kind of thing. Like, there's so much more physical representations now that are more accurate, and some
of them are high quality.
Like I said, I personally don't like to see you know, in my board games that have that kind of stuff, like, well, here's the enemies, they're all gray. Here's the heroes.
Good guys are all blue.
They're all blue
yeah.
or red or whatever plastic you can see. It's just like, ugh, I can't do that. If I'm playing a game that's supposed to be a role-playing, immersive sort of, kind of experience, that stuff goes a long way to help keep me in there. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Even if I'm the one, like, hosting it, right? Like, I'll paint everyone's models for them. I don't expect everyone else to do it of their own, but it helps me, and I think my players really get into it better and enjoy it more. So, yeah, I usually look for that kind of thing and usually pick up at least one every time I go of a new big box.
It's hard not to.
I know, it's so neat.
Impulse
I love
buying
it.
little minis,
and that's what makes conventions so much more special than just browsing online. For a while, they had these online convention tickets where it's like, so we're watching just like a sales video.
Yeah.
So
it's a
products,
store. It's a store.
And then you're directed to a store. Okay. This isn't convention.
Yep.
It's not the same thing. COVID, it doesn't work.
Nope.
Let's just call it off. Let's not try to have digital conventions because we're just going to web stores now.
Yeah.
So, but yeah, Gen Con, really excited. We'll see you there if you're going.
I think it's a little
it's
less
a
than
big
6
one.
weeks out now.
Yeah, it's a big one. So a lot of people go that cross over hobbies, and some people that aren't even interested in miniatures, card enthusiasts. This is their thing too. So artists and cosplay, like it's everything.
Yep.
So it's
there's authors and there's and there's brand new games being debuted, and there's lots of role playing game stuff there.
And then a bit of teaser stuff from the bigger companies too, but it's definitely not the miniatures aren't the focus of this type of convention. So, but yeah, so we'll see you there. They're gonna have also just like tons of like. There'll be like a new beer for the event, and
that's right,
and a whole bunch of like food trucks every day out there.
The block party.
But speaking of block party,
we don't have a food truck out front though.
But we could still eat.
We can still eat.
Yeah.
Wait, let's go get some.
Thanks for joining. We hope you enjoyed. Follow us for more of our weekly episodes on YouTube Podcasts, Spotify, and Podbean. You can follow myself and Llama on Instagram. We are at Llama Paints Minis and Hyena Paints Minis. Music provided by Kevin MacLeod at incompetech.com. And as always, we'll catch you next time.